pleasure to see you all here this evening. It's quite a crowd and quite a beautiful bouquet amongst this group this evening. We have some of everything and everybody here, and it's very pretty from this standpoint. My name is Phyllis Clark, and I'm the chair of the Board of Directors of Champaign County Healthcare Consumers. On behalf of Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, I would like to thank you all for being here tonight. Every year, we hold an annual awards dinner to celebrate the struggles and the victories of the past year, and to honor those individuals and organizations who have distinguished themselves in the pursuit of social justice and quality health care. Most of all, we look forward to this dinner because it's an opportunity for us to gather as a community. Our supporters and members and the staff and the board of directors of Champaign County Healthcare Consumers is indeed a community in itself. We are a community dedicated to the local grassroots struggles for improving health care for all. Tonight's event is special because it commemorates our 25th anniversary as an organization. The theme for this dinner is 25 years of grassroots organizing for healthcare justice, celebrating the power of collective struggle. So I welcome you, and I thank you for being here, and all the years that you have been with us and helped to support us in our struggle and in our work for justice. We are, of course, very pleased to have with us this evening, I think she's walking around somewhere right now, Ms. Elaine Brown. She's going to be our keynote speaker this evening. Ms. Brown is the former leader of the Black Panthers Party. She's the author of 2 books, A Taste of Power and The Condemnation of Little B. Ms. Brown is also a longtime activist and organizer, and I know that we're all looking forward to her presentation a little later this evening. Now it's time to do some acknowledgments. I'd like to take time now to acknowledge the co-sponsoring organizations who provided generous support to help make this healthcare consumers' rights dinner possible. The co-sponsors of this event include the Champaign-Urbana Public Health District, Champaign County Public Health District, Coalition for Consumer Rights, the Graduate Employees Organization, Illinois Center for Citizen Involvement, the Illinois Disciples Foundation, the Claudia, what is that? Jomijo?
Jomijo.
Oh, okay, Foundation, Public Interest Fund of Illinois, Urbana Human Relations Office. I'd also like to acknowledge the organizations and businesses who purchased and contributed to our honorary tables this evening. The Housing Authority of Champaign County for the Mary Louise White table, Bank Illinois for the Harry J. Baker table, Bank One for the Henrietta DeBoer table. Now I'd like to take a moment to introduce and to thank Kevin Hoover for providing our music this evening. Kevin is a jazz musician who has donated his time and talent this evening for this event. Kevin, where are you? Thank you. I encourage you all to go out and to hear Kevin at some of the other venues that he has an opportunity to play around town here. Before we move on, I would like to let you all know that dinner will be ready shortly. Short.
When you get done talking.
When I get done talking, so I shall read this quickly. A staff member of the Town and Country Catering will come to each table and let you know when your table can proceed to the buffet. For those of you who might be just a little more ravenous than the others, we're going to all tables have been served first. And then you can put the feedback on. Go back a second time. We will begin our program this evening with an awards presentation, and we will climax it with Ms. Brown's keynote address, and that will all fall after everyone has had their dinner. I hope you enjoy each other's company, the marvelous food that we're about to receive by Town and Country Catering, and our program, which will begin, well, they said it's 7:30, but you know how that is. I hope you all enjoy yourselves, enjoy the food, enjoy one another. Please talk, get to know who it is that you're sitting by. We don't hurt, we love you. Okay, enjoy your evening, and thank you again for coming. We're going to go ahead on and get ready to start the program so that we won't be holding everyone here at an ungodly hour. I'd like to again extend a thank you to Kevin Hoover for providing us the music. It was wonderful. I hope that everyone has an opportunity to at least purchase Ms. Brown's books and have them signed by her since she's here this evening. I want to thank our locally owned bookstore, Pages for All Ages, for setting up the book signing here at the dinner tonight. For those of you who didn't come prepared to buy copies of her book tonight, you will be able to purchase them tomorrow at Pages for All Ages, because she will be there as well, doing book signings there. So, get her book. Again, thanks to our organizations, to the organizations who have co-sponsored this event and have helped us to make it possible for you this evening. I would also like to take an opportunity to thank the people who have volunteered to help out with the registration, with the setup, and doing every other imaginable task this evening. I'd like to extend our gratitude to many individuals who contributed tickets to the dinner, for those who were unable to purchase them themselves and volunteered to let someone else have them. We'd like to thank you for that. Our keynote speaker and the presentation tonight by her will be recorded by our friends at the community radio station WEFT 90.1. The program will be broadcast on web later this summer, so listen and you'll hear it all over again. Before we begin our awards presentation, Claudia and I would like to introduce the staff and the board for Champaign County Healthcare Consultants. I myself will introduce the staff, and then after I am done, and I will give it to Claudia. First, let me tell you a little bit about our organization. Champaign County Healthcare Consumers is a 25-year-old grassroots citizen action organization dedicated to the belief that healthcare is a basic human right and that consumers must have a voice in the healthcare system. Since 1977, we have worked in Champaign County to provide consumer and community education, advocacy, and community organization to improve the healthcare system and to make concrete improvements in people's lives. The work of this organization and the victories we have achieved are really the result of the involvement of the people in the community who are dedicated themselves to work for change. We could not do it if it weren't for you, so please continue to volunteer so that we as a community may also continue our involvement and support for healthcare. As you know, this event tonight is very special because it does commemorate CCHCC's 25th anniversary as an organization. I would like to introduce the staff and the interns of Champaign County Healthcare Consumers. Now, these people are the ones that's in the trenches. They're working very, very hard to bring about the changes that Healthcare Consumers is advocating to do. If it weren't for the collective results and the collective efforts of all of the people that I'm about to introduce, then we would be in big trouble. We would be nowhere. We would not have achieved the things that we have achieved. So, when I call your names, if you're at a position where you can stand, please do. If you cannot stand, wave your hand viciously across so that we will know who you are. Brooke Anderson. Paulette Coleman. George Haggard. Larry Hendeleder. Oh, there's a little note here that says that he can't be here this evening, but he'll probably be back. Jeff Machota. And Jeff is not here this evening as well. He is recovering from major surgery. And please keep him in your thoughts and your prayers because he has a battle to fight, and we hope him speedy recovery and good health from that point on. Bill Muller. Amy Penfold. Kevin Sandifer. And the driving force, Claudia Lindhoff. Our interns and work study staff, Makia Bess, Jody Berkland, Ryan Daniels, Jamila McClinton, and Stephanie Reese. Thank you all for everything that you have done to make Healthcare Consumers the organization that it is today. Now, I am out of here, and Claudia is coming to take it forward from this point on. Enjoy your evening, finish eating, and please, have fun.
Thank you all very much for being here this evening. I know the weather isn't as good as it could be. Elaine Brown was, coming from Atlanta to here for our very good weather. So I will introduce you to the Champaign County Healthcare Consumers Board of Directors, and then we will begin with our awards presentations. And then following the awards presentation, we will introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, and you will enjoy her very much. You will. That was just a statement of fact, not an order. Okay, before I introduce our board of directors to you, I want to call your attention to our ad book program. All of the organizations and businesses who are advertising in our ad book are doing so in order to support Champaign County healthcare consumers and our work, and in turn we want to encourage you to support them as well. Now, on to our board of directors. We are very fortunate to have a very committed, energetic, and engaged group of people serving on our board of directors. Our board members are individuals who volunteer their time to oversee the functioning and well-being of the Champaign County healthcare consumers. Now, I'd like to introduce our board of directors. And as I introduce y'all, please either wave your hand or stand up so that you can be recognized. Phyllis Clark, who you all just met. Chair of our board. Our vice chair is Lester Pritchard, who is not here this evening because he's raising Cain someplace else. Mike Doyle, who is our treasurer. Wilford Bott, who's our secretary. Mr. Lloyd Carter. Reverend James B. Holloman. Daniel Mills. Flavors Northington. And the matriarch of our organization, Ms. Mamie Smith. Try to come, but she's not able to, but she's still with us. Okay, and now we're going to begin our awards presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Brooke Anderson, who will present the first couple of awards. And what I'd like to do is ask everybody who's presenting and the healthcare consumer staff to go ahead and come on up front down here.
Good evening. Our first two awards concern the work of the Women's Health Task Force's campaign to win contraceptive coverage for University of Illinois employees. A year ago, CCHCC brought together women's rights advocates, unions, and other organizations to fight for an end in gender discrimination in employee health plans. A year later, with the major victory behind us, but yet with much work to be done, we want to recognize two leaders who have been instrumental in this struggle. First, our Activist of the Year award goes to Jenny Mueller. Jenny is an incredible organizer who sparked the campaign for contraceptive coverage and who continues to inspire women to organize for their health care rights. 2 years ago, Jenny was diagnosed with endometriosis and was prescribed oral contraceptives. Jenny was shocked, however, when she went to the pharmacy and learned that the medication that she needed to treat her disorder was not covered by the University of Illinois employee health plans, simply because this medication could also be used for contraception. Jenny then contacted our consumer health hotline and worked with worked with our advocates to persuade her insurer, Personal Care HMO, to change their policy. And Jenny's fight to get her own pills took over a year and took incredible dedication and perseverance on her part. And when she finally succeeded in getting her pills covered, she didn't stop there. Instead, she felt that no woman should have to go through what she had to go through to get her pills covered. So she helped form our Women's Health Task Force to organize for contraceptive coverage for U of I employees and other local workers. Since then, she has been tireless in her work with the task force, helping write letters, get postcards signed, organize press conferences and panels, and speaking out on the issue at every opportunity. Her energy, her dedication, her solid analysis of the issue has been an inspiration to all of us on the task force and has inspired countless other women to get involved. Jenny's efforts with the task force led to a major victory in the campaign for contraceptive coverage and is testament to the fact that dedicated people working together can make concrete changes in the systems that affect people's lives. Please join me in applauding our 2002 Healthcare Consumer Activist of the Year, Jenny Mueller. Jenny, please come up. Our next award is the Elsie Field Provider of the Year Award. And this year the award goes to the University of Illinois McKinley Health Center for the implementation of the Employee Oral Contraceptive Program and their multicultural health services. As a result of the Women's Health Task Force organizing, U of I Chancellor Nancy Cantor and McKinley Health Center collaborated to establish the Employee Oral Contraceptive Program, through which U of I employees can now receive free oral contraceptives at McKinley. This program is a great first step on the part of the university toward addressing gender inequality in healthcare available to university employees. And McKinley's efforts to make this program a reality should really stand as models for what similarly equipped employers can and should do as important first steps toward the ultimate goal of contraceptive coverage through employee health plans. And so we're very, very grateful to McKinley Health Center for their innovative and their immediate efforts to meet the needs of UIUC employees. We also want to thank, the Women's Health Task Force didn't have anything to do with this, but we wanted to also thank McKinley for their leadership and their vision and bringing into existence a McKinley Health Center clinic at the Orchard Downs housing area to deliver culturally sensitive illness prevention and health promotion services to an underserved and culturally diverse community. This clinic is a wonderful model for integrating community and university resources and a system that will be a model for future collaboration endeavors geared toward improving the welfare of diverse communities. So for its Employee Oral Contraceptive Program and its multicultural services, we've named U of I the Elsie Field Provider of the Year. And here tonight to accept the award on behalf of McKinley Health Center is Jerry Upadimpa. And so if everyone would welcome, we're welcoming and applauding Dr. Upadimpa from the McKinley Health Center as the Elsie Field Provider of the Year.
Hi, my name is Bill Muller, and I will be presenting the Harry J. Baker Community Service Award tonight. This award is intended to honor community members whose dedication and work toward healthcare justice stands out and makes a concrete difference both in our organization's work and in the lives of people in the community. I'm very pleased to say that this year's recipient is Carmen Reed. Is an integral member of the Healthcare Consumers family. She's also a long-standing member of the Medical Billing Task Force, helping us devise strategies and using her own healthcare experiences to gather key information that the task force has then been able to use in its fight against illegal and unethical medical billing practices. She also overcame a reluctance to fly in order to travel to Boston with Claudia last year. And there, she and Claudia represented healthcare consumers at a national conference of grassroots organizations working on healthcare issues. Carmen now also participates in the Community Health Partnership and in the Access to Care Working Group. At a recent Community Health Partnership meeting, It became evident that our major healthcare providers were yet again determined to avoid any real commitment or any real responsibility for improving the health of our community. Carmen was outraged, and she usually doesn't say a lot at these meetings, but she did at this one, speaking quietly in the manner of the retired school teacher that she is. She passionately and eloquently just dressed them down for their pettiness and their self-serving greed. It was great. Several partnership members still talk to me about it when I see them. And I also got the impression that day that some of the providers' representatives, and these are people who aren't generally known for exhibiting much sense of camaraderie or connection with the rest of us or with the larger community, I think they actually felt embarrassed. And Carmen, you're the only person who could have pulled that off. For that and many other things, Carmen, it gives us great pleasure to present you with the Harry J. Baker Community Service Award.
I guess this year I shouldn't be as nervous as I've been for the last 3 years, but it changes. My name is Paulette Colvin, and I'm on staff at Healthcare Consumers, and I'm here to present the Henrietta DeBoer Volunteer of the Year Awards to 2 people tonight, Greg Beck and Chris Carter. Greg has worked as a hotline advocate for 2 years now. He has been an expert on HMO appeals. He also is working with the Medical Data Research Project. And he has been observing and doing outreach and research on small claims court in Champaign County. He is working with the Land of Lincoln Legal Assistance Foundation to develop materials to help people on fixed income to protect themselves from vicious billing collectors and bill collectors in hospitals and clinics. Greg just finished his first year as a law student. Sometimes this last year Sometimes this last year, his studies have kept him from coming into the office for a while. Greg feels guilty about it. For this year, we have been understanding and nice to him. But if he still feels guilty next year, we plan to shamelessly exploit that guilt and squeeze every bit of work and energy we can out of him. Greg, don't feel guilty. We are fortunate to have you. And we are pleased to present you with the Volunteers of the Year Award. Chris Cotter is a good friend of mine. When I told her that she was getting this award, she accused me of personally pushing it. But I didn't. I didn't need to. The rest of the healthcare consumer staff brought her name up and insisted on recognizing her. I didn't even go. Chris is in the office pretty much every week, helping with both mail-in, with clerical work, and with everything else that comes up. She is calm and gracious through all kinds of crises and under difficult circumstances, including when one of our volunteers decides to put the moves on her. Chris, thanks for everything. Thanks for the organization, for your dedication and hard work, and thanks for me personally as my friend.
I'm Amy Penfold, and I'm the hotline coordinator at CCH As you know, our consumer health hotline, which is now 22 years old, helps consumers having problems with any part of the healthcare system. Volunteer advocates work with consumers, empowering them to solve the immediate problems and be able to solve future problems that may occur. And it is through the hotline that we often first hear of the latest issues that's affecting consumers in the community. Each year we give the Amy Olson Advocate of the Year Award to a hotline advocate who's been especially helpful and involved and central to the hotline's operation. And this year's award goes to Kyle Gerlach. Kyle comes in every week, gets on the phones, and starts working with people. If he has to miss a scheduled slot, he lets us know in advance, which isn't that common. In addition to a lot of research into websites and other resources, in addition, he does a lot of research into websites and other resources that are helping the hotline to increase its ability to help consumers. He recently helped me conduct my first formal hotline training for new advocates, and Kyle is now working with our new SSI transition project to help youth with disabilities receive the benefits they're entitled to. I'm pleased to give the Advocate of the Year Award to Kyle Gerlach.
I am presenting a new award and the first recipient of that award. Many of you knew Dave Anderson over the last 15 plus years. Dave passed away last August. Dave was healthcare consumers' door canvasser. He went door to door all over the county, talking with people in their homes, telling them about our organization and about the latest healthcare issues, asking about the healthcare issues they were facing, and asking them to contribute money to support us. It was a hard way to earn a living, but Dave loved it, and he is legendary among community organizers throughout Illinois for his excellence. More than that, Dave loved and was devoted to healthcare justice and social justice, and he had a gift for getting other people excited about the same things that he cared about. So excited that they would give him money on the spot. Many of healthcare consumer supporters over the years would not donate to any other fundraising effort we put on. They tell us we only give when Dave comes around. We've also gotten some of our best advocates and volunteers from Dave talking to them at the door. We decided to create a new award to help honor and remember his spirit and his work. The David Leroy Anderson Community Building Award will honor members of the community who have lovingly dedicated themselves to building a movement and a community that will fight for what's right. Once we decided to create the new award, there was no question in our minds who should get the first one. Many of you also know Ruth Baker, our longtime afternoon receptionist who has been with healthcare consumers for at least 20 years until her recent retirement at age 82. And she's not here this evening. But Ruth was a leader for healthcare consumers in the early 1980s when we were creating the Medicare 100 and Plus programs. She went all around the county and spoke to every seniors group and to church groups, getting the word out and creating support for the program. Then, years later, when Provena Health immorally withdrew Covenant Medical Center from the programs, and I might add illegally, which is why we're suing them, Ruth got up from behind the front desk and went out to do more public speaking, rallying program members and the larger community to stand up and fight Provena. Ruth has always agreed with us that her presence in CCHCC office truly classed up the joint. She also considers herself the most patient woman alive. Well, she really did class up the joint. Ruth was always willing to pick up the phone and offer callers the benefit of her life experience. It wasn't unusual to walk into the office and find her on the phone saying something like, "Honey, I know a little bit about men." We're all laughing because we heard it many times. Can't tell you what else she said, but if you asked her who she was just on the phone with, she'd say she didn't know. It was just someone calling, looking for the public health department, and they got to talking. Ruth loved Dave Anderson dearly, and she loves everyone at Healthcare Consumers and our work, and she has dedicated many years and a lot of worry to fighting for healthcare justice. We're all better for knowing her and working with her and standing with her in struggle. She very much deserves this award. We and the entire community owe people like Dave Anderson and Ruth Baker our gratitude. And as I said, Ruth couldn't be here tonight, but we'll get her award soon and maybe share a glass of wine and some old organizing stories with her in the bargain. I'm still here because I'm presenting a couple different awards. The next award that I'm presenting is the Leadership in Government Award. And as many as you know, since 1996, Healthcare Consumers has coordinated the county-wide coalition, Friends of Public Health. First in passing the 1996 referendum to establish the Champaign County Health Department, and since then in fighting to secure solid funding and an expansion of badly needed public health services. From the beginning, Friends of Public Health has had members and enjoyed support from a wide variety of individuals and organizations, including many government officials, many of whom are here this evening, some county board members who have been very instrumental in the fight. The coalition is about public health, and we have stayed focused on that mission. But in Champaign County, public health is a highly political issue. If you can imagine anything more stupid than that, but that's the reality. Mike Graham is a Republican and a resident of Rantoul who has served on the county board since, I believe, 1996 or 97. He was initially skeptical of the new county health department, but he is a person of principle, and he carefully studied what public health is and what it does for a community, and he studied what the needs of Rantoul and Champaign County are for such services. And he became a solid supporter of public health services for Champaign County. As part of his support, he managed to get himself appointed to the Board of Health as a liaison to the county board and has served in that position for a couple of years. Supporting public health has put Mike at odds with his own political party and has effectively ended his political career, but he has never wavered. He knows that he is doing the right thing for his community and for the entire county, and he has shown courage and integrity in sticking to that. It has been a pleasure and an honor for Healthcare Consumers and Friends of Public Health to join with him in the struggle for this cause. And Mike cannot be here tonight, but we will deliver the award to him, perhaps at the next Board of Health meeting. Okay, now we're on to the Lifetime Achievement Awards. This evening, on our organization's 25th anniversary, we are presenting 2 awards for lifetime achievement to 2 individuals who have made a tremendous difference in our community, and in particular over the past 25 years. Their work is by no means over. Lifetime doesn't mean they're done. It just means they've done a whole lot. We are presenting these awards to Joan Lathrop and to Mike Doyle, and I'd like to begin with the presentation for Joan Lathrop. Joan has been living and working in this community for many years, since the formation of Healthcare Consumers in 1977, in fact. Joan is a social worker who retired from the CU Public Health District in February of 2001, where she served as Director of Social Services. She is a hero to many people in this community, to people concerned with social justice, social services, public health, and HIV/AIDS. She is the person who really got our community's major HIV/AIDS resources and services going. She started working at CUPHD as an intern in 1976 and joined staff in 1977. In her role as a social worker at the CUPHD, Joan saw the need to start addressing the HIV/AIDS crisis locally, long before any state or federal assistance was being made available to local communities, and at a time when there was tremendous resistance, stigma, homophobia, and denial about HIV/AIDS, even among healthcare and social service professionals who at times criticized Joan for the amount of time and energy she put into working on this issue. But Joan just kept on trudging forward and speaking out, advocating for victims of HIV/AIDS and getting programs up and going. Joan became a founding member of the Prairie AIDS Foundation, whose goal was to establish a house and services for people living with HIV and AIDS in this community. As a social worker at the CUPHD, she was able to facilitate the collaboration of 3 nonprofits and the CUPHD to provide funding for a half-time social worker to work with these clients, long before any state funding was available. The organizations who collaborated to make this possible were the Prairie AIDS Foundation, GCAP, and the United Way. The Prairie AIDS Foundation achieved their goal of creating the Champaign House, which is now overseen by GCAP. I want to add that by the time that Joan became well known as an HIV/AIDS activist and worker, she was already well recognized in this community as a social worker for many years. I'd like Joan to go ahead and come up, and what I want to say is that tonight we recognize and celebrate Joan's life and work in this community, which has resulted in the creation of important services, education, and collaboration, all for making concrete improvements in people's lives. And she has not only nurtured people in their bodies and their health, but also in their souls. And so, Joan, we applaud your work and offer our sincere thanks, and we are grateful that even though you are retired, you are still choosing to live and work in our community. Congratulations. Okay, tonight we are also awarding the Lifetime Achievement Award to Mike Doyle. Mike, I know he hates this stuff. This is for us more than it is for you, apparently. Mike is only 47 years old, so it seems somehow inappropriate to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award. But as we were thinking about this, midlife achievement or midlife crisis, it just didn't sound quite right. As most of you know, Mike is a co-founder of Healthcare Consumers, and there are many other co-founders here tonight, I'm happy to say. But he is a co-founder of Healthcare Consumers, starting the organization as a class project back in 1977. He has since served on the staff and on the board, and on the staff again, and now on the board again, always dedicating himself to the mission and principles of Healthcare Consumers. In the process, he has helped build a multi-issue, multicultural, grassroots social justice organization that has helped thousands upon thousands of individuals and families and has fought and won countless battles for healthcare and social justice, and has earned a national reputation for effectiveness in community organizing. Mike didn't stop with founding merely one organization, of course. He also has founded or co-founded the Illinois Center for Citizen Involvement, Families Advocating Injury Reduction, and the Public Interest Fund of Illinois. Mike is well known and highly recognized by such consumer advocates as Sidney Wolf, a public citizen, the Consumers Union, and of course Ralph Nader. Mike Doyle will be the first to say that he did not do all of this alone. And in fact, there are many people here this evening who are long-time dedicated and powerful community organizers and activists. And the point is exactly right. Mike Doyle did not do it alone. Mike Doyle is a brilliant and generous community organizer who works in struggle with others to achieve real victories and to protect democracy in our community. And because of his activism, he is doing it less and less alone, and more of us join in struggle. You know, there used to be an ad about the columnist Mike Royko that said, "Some people swear by Mike, others swear at him, but everybody reads him." Well, some people love Mike Doyle, others despise him, but all of them live in a better world because of him. So Mike, tonight we are giving you this award to thank you for your years of work and sharing your life with our community, and to tell you that we look forward to seeing what you accomplish in the next 25 years.
The Golden Bedpan is awarded by the Board of Directors to the individual or individuals or corporation or political body that has distinguished itself above all others during the preceding year by its attack on the health and welfare of the citizens of Illinois. Last year, the recipient was the United States Supreme Court. Yes, all 9 justices.
Yeah, that's right.
For their vicious and unprecedented attacks on disabled individuals and their protection of insurance companies who are now able to inflict injury without fear of consequences in a court of law on their own insureds by forcing them to delay needed medical care. This year, there was one and only one choice that came to the minds of the board members when we considered who should receive the Golden Bedpan. This year's recipient is Governor George Ryan. Beginning in 2001, George Ryan launched an attack on the health, the health care, and welfare of Illinois' most vulnerable citizens, children, the elderly, the disabled, and the mentally ill, through his proposed budget cuts, which, if enacted, would devastate, sometimes up to nearly 50%, Medicaid payments to physicians, dentists, hospitals, nursing homes, pharmacies, mental health care providers, and providers of services for the disabled. Governor Ryan could have selected other ways to balance the budget. He could have saved money by proposing reformation of prescription purchasing plans by the state He could have ceased subsidizing horse racing. He could have increased casino fees and taxes, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to balance the state budget on the backs of the poorest and least able to care for themselves or defend themselves. George Ryan, this bedpan, chilled to a stimulating 20 degrees. But of course, Governor Ryan did have assistance in his attack on health care in Illinois. The fabulous four, as we like to call them, Kate Phillips, Emil Jones, Mike Madigan, and Lee Daniels, have all been amazingly unhelpful in responding to this attack and have brought the budget process to a virtual halt by their bickering and protection of their own sources of funding and power. The Fab Four do deserve at least an honorable mention in this award of the Golden Bedpan. Fortunately, Governor Ryan will be a one-term governor. It would be difficult for the next governor to make such a vicious attack on the health and welfare of the people of Illinois. We look forward to his speedy departure and wish him well in his next job, perhaps as a political campaign consultant. All raspberries aside, we would like to end the awards with one positive recognition. We also attempt during these awards to recognize those who have distinguished themselves in their courageous fight for the rights and welfare of all citizens, and especially those of the young, the elderly, the poor, and the disabled individuals during the past year. This past year, one woman, Bettina Chapman, did the unthinkable in Champaign. She stood up to the discriminatory practices of one of the most powerful landlords in Champaign and objected to their practice of not renting to individuals receiving housing assistance from the state, commonly known as Section 8. She was assisted in her protest by Esther Patt and the Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union, and by John Rosca and the staff of the Land of Lincoln Legal Assistance Office in Champaign. Unlike the city of Urbana, the city of Champaign has no ordinance protecting individuals from landlords who discriminate against them when an individual receives housing assistance from the state. This issue was brought to the attention of the Champaign City Council, but the council refused to address it. Ms. Chapman, Ms. Pat, Mr. Rosca, we salute you and applaud your efforts to advocate for the rights of individuals, even when it means taking on large and powerful corporations.
Okay, I know that this is what y'all have all been waiting for. We're going to introduce the keynote speaker now. For our 25th anniversary celebration, we wanted to select a special speaker, someone who could carry the power of and necessity for collective struggle and grassroots organizing for human rights and social justice. We could think of no person better than Elaine Brown. In order to properly introduce Elaine Brown, I will first provide some biographical information about her, and then, in case it's not perfectly obvious after all that, Brooke Anderson will tell you a little bit more about why it is that we feel so honored to have Ms. Brown with us this evening. In 1974, Elaine Brown became the first and only woman chairman of the Black Panther Party. She led the party in establishing many outstanding community empowerment programs such as free health clinics and freedom schools. Under her leadership, the party effected election of the first black mayor of Oakland, California, built a complex of 300 new houses for the poor, and joint developed Oakland City Center project to guarantee 10,000 jobs for black and poor people. As a member of the Black Panther Party, Brown ran for public office twice, and she traveled extensively on behalf of the party from North Korea and North Vietnam to Cuba and Algeria. She is the author of her memoir, A Taste of Power, which is being developed as a film by HBO. Brown is also the author of recently published The Condemnation of Little B, which is a book about the prosecution and trial of 13-year-old African-American Michael Lewis in Atlanta, Georgia. In examining the story of Little B, she explodes a myth that the days of de facto racism are dead and offers a stinging criticism of the burden racism imposes on black youth in America. She has also organized the Michael Lewis Legal Defense Committee to support the legal appeal of Lewis of Michael Lewis, Little B, arrested at the age of 13 for a murder he did not commit, for which he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison in 1997. And I believe later on she'll tell you how you can help out with that. Brown is also a board member of Mothers Advocating Juvenile Justice, a grassroots Georgia-based organization composed mostly of mothers of children incarcerated in adult prisons that is seeking elimination of harsh juvenile justice laws. She grew up in the ghettos of North Philadelphia and has attended Temple University, UCLA, Mills College, and Southwestern University School of Law. And her papers were recently acquired for the African American Archives at Emory University Library. And she is the mother of Erica Brown Abram. And that's the biographical sketch, and now I'm going to ask Brooke Anderson to come up and say a few more words, and then we'll hear from Ms. Brown.
Actually, first off, I've been asked to make an announcement that if anyone finds extra car keys that are not yours, there is a set that is missing, and the car is not the door prize. So if you have them, please, please take them to the back of their room to Amy. And Amy, if you could wait, if you find extra car keys, those are someone who needs to get home. Okay, well, good evening, and again, I want to extend a warm welcome to Elaine Brown on behalf of the Champaign County Healthcare consumers and everyone here tonight. We're absolutely thrilled to have her here. In doing the outreach that we did for this event, I can't tell you how many people that we talked to when we told them that Elaine Brown was coming. Just the whole face would light up, and the comments that we would get over the phone. The turnout calls took probably 2 or 3 times the amount of time they should have, because people were telling us their favorite Elaine Brown quotes and when they heard her last speak and wanted to talk about parts of her book. And I really had to tell people that I've got more people to call. We can talk about Elaine Brown later. So there really is a lot of excitement here to bring Elaine Brown. Her life, her work, and her political vision have inspired many of us in Champaign County and beyond. A lot of us as staff and as volunteers have read her books, which people should buy afterwards, and her analysis and her vision have deepened our understanding of the interconnectedness of oppression. Her stories have impressed upon us the importance of history informing our present movement, and her sheer courage that she's displayed throughout her life and her organizing has toughened our resolve and our continue to struggle for justice. And in this struggle, our organizing for healthcare justice stems from the 3 principles of direct action organizing, giving people a sense of their own power, making concrete improvements in people's lives, and altering the relations of power. And as these principles guide our lives, whether we're fighting against Medicare discrimination or against the evil debt collectors and whatnot. So part of what we are excited about to have Elaine here tonight is because all of her work exemplifies to the best these principles. Her organizing has at the base serving, educating, involving, and learning from the people who are most affected by the problems she seeks to address. From the Black Panther Party's survival programs providing people with free clothes, food, education, and health care, to her work today against the criminalization, vilification, and abandonment of Black youth, Elaine's work and writings never stray from an understanding that the dreadful policies that people in power have made, they have very real, immediate, and horrifying consequences for the lives and the welfare of everyday people. And so we know from her writings this importance of learning from the history of people's movements for change and having that inform our own movements. And so we're excited to have her here to share that history and to help us think about the movements that we're all involved in. And her work's also a shining example of the necessity of systemic change, because she's taught us that the outcomes of these organizing victories aren't just academic affairs. They're not just something we think and we write about, but they really determine whether or not the majority of Americans and folks in the world will have the basic life necessities. And we're just so glad to have her here today, and I know y'all are very excited to hear her. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Elaine Brown.
And certainly to Claudia Lenhoff, who put so much energy into contacting me. I, who was just slothful and sitting around, really. But you said so much, Brooke, I hardly know if I have anything left to talk about, but I'm going to try to follow you. Well, this thing is high, so I can't see everybody, but I want to mention that when, is this, can I put this down or something? When in the Black Panther Party, and I do want to go back a little bit to that just for a reference point, because there hasn't been very much since then among blacks in terms of a movement. We used to say, all power to the people. And I still believe that. Someone asked me recently if I were an anachronism, and I said, well, that would depend on your view of society today. And since I determined that black people are not free, I consider myself to be very contemporary, my thoughts to be very contemporaneous under the circumstance. So I will say again, as I did 30-some years ago when I joined the Black Panther Party, which was the primary slogan of our party, all power to the people. And what we meant by that, the underpinning of which was an ideological concept, it was an anti-capitalist, of course, anti-racist, a humane ideal to develop a new kind of society, one in which people would have the power to determine what would happen to all the people and to serve the interests of all the people. The irony of it, of course, is that this seems to be the ideology on which the United States of America was founded, and yet we know that today in America, as then, that is to say back in the day of the Black Panther Party, if not before, all power belongs to that 1% of America that owns and controls all of the resources, not only in the United States, but just about on the entire globe. And we know that the government of this country continues to serve and serve the interests of these corporate chiefs and their various corporations. That is to say, we have the Enron government, the Exxon government, the Microsoft, Lockheed government. These are the government entities. These are the government interests that are served or served by the government. We wage wars for these so-called interests, as we well know. We used to, back in the day, it was the communist threat to democracy, not capitalist, but democracy. I love the language in this. And we talked about Vietnam, for example, and other places in the world where America was stretching its tentacles, fighting against the Russian threat or the Soviet threat or what have you. Today, of course, we have seen the similar threat in Iraq, in Somalia, in Afghanistan, all of which seems to be ironically tied to oil. I don't know how, but somehow it just seems that this is all connected to oil, and that there are a lot of oil people involved in the government. But, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist on this. I'll just say it looks that way to me, sort of the way, now we know that what did Bush know, or what didn't he know? And, I don't want to laugh at this man, because this man is killing people around the planet. So I don't find anything at all humorous about his, psychological or educational inadequacies, though they are pretty evident as an individual. But then, you have Rumsfeld and Condoleezza Rice, and as Amiri Baraka said, what kind of skeezer is Condoleezza, So I wish I had said it myself, but I didn't. I quote it all the time. I don't have anything to rhyme with Colin Powell, other than I like to always refer to him as Clarence Thomas with a gun. I know a lot of Negroes like Colin Powell because he looks so nice. It's too bad, he's on the cover of Ebony and Essence and all this kind of stuff. But these corporate chiefs that are the government and the military of this country, and some people by definition would say that would be a fascist arrangement. But I'm not going to talk about that kind of thing now. I'll just talk about some more concrete things. But the bottom line is these men have put a price on our heads. And that price is if you can't afford to buy food, the penalty is death. You just will go hungry. Am I right? If you can't afford health care, not to count all the things that made you sick in the first place and preventing that, which is just about everything in our entire lives, from the paint to the polluted skies, air, ground, water, housing, and so forth and so on, and the very food that we eat if we had the money to buy some food or get some food. barring all of that, but if you cannot pay to fix that when you're dying of something, the penalty is death. If you can't get your teeth fixed, you'll just get them removed, you know, so forth and so on. So there is a price on our heads in the United States of America. And it's funny that we don't get that. I mean, it seems to me that, you know, this rallying around the flag lately, I was a little shocked by some of the people that were rallying. Weren't you? You know, it's like Robert De Niro, you know, people that you thought had a little bit of sense, you know, just waving the flag of the United States of America. And I found it interesting that people would do that with no information and no understanding about what is happening. And here we are talking about the concept of health care in the richest country, and certainly the most powerful in not only the world, but the history of the world. And yet people walking around here making choices like, should I get a mammogram or should I pay rent? I think I'll pay rent or feed my children. Should I get and I love the advertising that comes out of the airways. Tell a friend, get a mammogram. Can you tell a friend where you can get a free mammogram? Why can't you get a free mammogram? What's the reason for that? Because it's expensive to run that machine that's been paid 1,000 times? Why is it expensive to get a pap smear? $150. And you know, when you reach my age, you need a pap smear like every 6 months. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, it becomes expensive just to talk about having a pap smear. When you had a friend that died of cervical cancer, then you know that might have saved her life if she had had the money to get one. And what is the pap smear? As I was talking to Claudia earlier, I mean, it's a stick, you know, it's an elongated Q-tip. What's the price of that? And somebody's going to read the little smear and tell you that you have a problem or you don't. And there's 1,000 other people that don't. Now, how much does that realistically cost? I can tell you right now, not very much. And yet we pay for things like this. So there is a price on our heads, and as a result, in America today, I would suggest that the majority of people are in fact denied the right to life. That is to say, health care and food and housing and all those things that allow you to live, okay? And if we are denied accordingly, we're denied the right to liberty, and we're not even thinking about the pursuit of happiness. We're just trying to pursue a paycheck and try to work for that 1% that owns and operates the government of this country. Now, this arrangement in America has been particularly rough for black people in America, which isn't to say I want to get here and start talking about comparing hardships. But the reality is that other than the native people, everybody else except blacks came here involuntarily. Voluntarily. We came involuntarily. We know that the reason today even we find that some of the things that are going on in the black community, we say, well, wait a minute, hasn't there been some progress? You know, people identify people like Oprah Winfrey as representative of progress among black people. And, or Star Jones, or Michael Jordan, you know, or, you know, the Condoleezza, that's it. So there's some kind of a notion, look, Bush has probably a more diverse cabinet than any president ever. As a matter of fact, we know he has, right? And so we find that this ideal that we have made progress as a people, from the outside, people actually believe that, and many Americans believe it. Well, there's no more problems with race in America. What is the problem? But we know that at this point, 1/4 of blacks living in America are living below the poverty line. In Atlanta, where I live, for example, 90% of school children are black, and 80% qualify for free or subsidized lunch. And some people say, well, and so effectively what you're saying is all the school children, all the black children in Atlanta are poor because they qualify for subsidized lunch. And some people say, well, some people are cheating and lying to get a free lunch. Well, that might be reasonable if you've ever eaten one of those lunches. You might know there's no way in hell that you would lie if you had some options on lunch. Especially given the the amount of food poisoning in the state of Georgia public schools lately that has been so outrageous that it's actually become newspaper articles, which the newspaper generally ignores things of this type. We know that, of course, most of the households in the black community are headed by women, where their children, that is, and that the majority of those children of single mothers, black mothers, are living in poverty, more than half. Black unemployment is more than double that of white unemployment. Income gap between blacks and whites was the same at the end of the 20th century as it was at the end of the 19th century. Of course, we don't own anything in America. 0.4% of all of the business revenues in America are black businesses. In other words, less than 1%. Infant mortality rate, of course, we know about that, double that of white babies. And what are we doing in the United States of America having an infant mortality rate in the first place? No idea. The interesting thing about the black infant mortality rate is that some people at one point were suggesting that one of the reasons for that had to do with some kind of cultural norm that black mothers had to put our babies on their stomachs as opposed to on their backs, and that somehow this caused SIDS, and that SIDS therefore was, the high level of SIDS was somehow attributable to the disparity between black infant death mortality and white. And then you find out that where does this idea come from? I've been black for 59 years. I never knew anybody in my community that said we have to put our babies on it. That's what we do. No. We do what we have to do, you know. So come to find out that SIDS, of course, sudden infant death syndrome, the reason that it's called SIDS is because the reason for the death of the infant is unknown. So how you can attribute one thing to that, and these studies are so minor, and they've studied 4 people, and then they come to conclusions and so forth. The bottom line is we know why there is a high black infant mortality rate in the United States. It has something to do with poverty. There is the black maternal mortality rate, of course, is 4 times that of whites. Breast cancer death rate double that of whites. Cervical cancer 1/3 greater. Prostate cancer among black men, the prostate cancer death double that of white men. As a matter of fact, black men in America are having the highest rate of prostate cancer in the world. 65% of children with AIDS are black. 63% of the women with AIDS are black. You know, people tell you that AIDS is a disease of choice. Don't you love that? It's a lifestyle problem. It all has to do with who you chose to sleep with and what kind of sexual activity you had. As though these children with AIDS had something to do with, why is there the disparity between certain populations and other populations? Now, those of us, Barry, who lived through the 60s, remember that we were in that moment when we were talking about sexual revolution. And we didn't fool around. That is to say, we fooled around a lot. And we didn't even think about using contraceptives or anything that resembled contraceptives. And we didn't die of AIDS. And so I'm saying this to say, as Elton John said, if sexual preferences and lifestyle had something to do with it, he'd alone been dead, so would I. So we have to ask ourselves, where is it all coming from? And it's a question that has not been raised in this country. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, black people are always thinking somebody's doing something to them, you know. But there is something to be said for these monkey blood rumors, okay? Because even if we assume there had been some African somewhere eating some monkey blood, they've been eating it for 5,000 years and haven't been dying of AIDS, so I have some questions about it myself. The same thing goes for crack cocaine. You know, I love when people say, well, you know, just because crack cocaine is put into the black community doesn't mean you have to use it. Of course, there is an acknowledgement that it was specifically dumped into the black community, you know. And when Gary Webb wrote those wonderful articles for the San Jose Mercury News, and a number of black or Negro Congress people thought they were going to have investigations into what happened, the crack cocaine inundation of the black community, that was all abandoned for surrounding Clinton in his time of need, his Monica Lewinsky time of need. So we never got around to talking about the devastation of crack cocaine, which is clearly a major health problem. And somebody says, well, this is another one of those choice issues. And I think to myself, well, you know, I didn't use crack cocaine, and I grew up in the deep hood. You know, I'm like Eve, Philly, where I am from. And I never used crack cocaine, and for only one reason, it wasn't there. It was not complicated. I would have tried anything just like everybody else. People too there in poor my neighborhood didn't even afford marijuana. I didn't know anybody smoked marijuana until about 19 or 20. I smoked cigarettes. Would you like to know why? They were available. And everybody tried everything in those days. And most of us who are over 50 years old remember that we probably smoked a cigarette. And we didn't know about nicotine and tar. And we didn't know we were going to die of lung cancer and all that other stuff. So we didn't make a choice. So, gee, let me see. I think I want to die of lung cancer, so let me pick up this cigarette. No, we did not make choices like that. We thought we were being cool and slick and all that other stuff, and we had other issues to deal with. So this business is pretty rough. When we look at the overall status, therefore, of blacks in America today, it's no different effectively since of the status of blacks since 1966, or really since 1865. Because we don't own anything or control anything in our environment, period. Things happen to us. We are consumers. That's what we are, a consumer group. As a matter of fact, we're referred to as a consumer group because that's what we are. We consume products, and that's the effective value that we have as people in this country. Now, that is reflected, that reality, in the life of Little B, this kid I wrote a book about. But it really isn't about Little B because, as I like to say, Little B is not one in a million, but one of millions of black children. We know Little B. He's a kid that's out there where mom's a crack whore, dad's gone. His specific father just died of AIDS complications last year. His mother is now on heroin and has cancer. And he's in prison for life. And when he was growing up, by 8 years old, his house was the crack house. By the time he was 8 in the neighborhood, by the time he was 11, his mother had been declared unfit for the third time that she had been taken to the juvenile court for that hearing. And he had no place, basically, to live other than the group home from which he ran away because he wanted to go back home to his mother and into the neighborhood in which he was born. And it was a serious area in Atlanta called the Bluff. And everybody in Atlanta just about knows that it's an area in which a lot of drugs are being sold. You don't just buy crack cocaine in the Bluff. You can buy powder cocaine, heroin. You can buy ecstasy. You can buy anything that you want. And a lot of the students from the 6 various colleges around that area know that very well. But we know Little B because he was not only poor and not only hungry, not only in the street trying to survive, but he was alone and effectively homeless for the last 2 years before he was arrested from 11 to 13 years old. And he was out on the street just scrounging around for food and selling drugs a little bit to survive and doing work for the drug dealers in the area and so forth. We've seen him in Chicago, we've seen him in Detroit, in Philadelphia, in New York, in Boston, in Baltimore, in New Orleans, in Dallas, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in Oakland. We see him all over this country. There is nobody coming to see about him anymore. Nobody has a dream for him anymore. And yet he is dying just like a large percentage of people of a variety of ills from crack cocaine. As a matter of fact, when I met Michael, he said to me, he told me he was in the prison when we were talking one day, rather, and he was in the prison by then, and I said, I know the prison food is horrible, but just try to find some vegetables or fruit or something, eat some kind of vegetable, eke it out of something. There must be something that you can find that resembles a vegetable. Just do your best to hold on to your health. And he said, I don't eat no vegetables. I said, you don't eat no vegetables, you're going to have to eat some vegetables. He said, I don't like vegetables. I said, well, when you get out, you're going to eat something. I said, matter of fact, I think I'm going to throw some broccoli down your throat. And he said, broccoli? I don't eat broccoli. Okay, I'll eat some greens, but I have to eat it with cornbread, crumple up some cornbread, put it in there, put some hot sauce on it, stir it up, mix it up with your hands, eat with your hands. I said, eat it with your hands? He said, yeah, that's the ghetto way. I said, what you mean the ghetto? He said, you don't seem to know very much about the ghetto. I said, what? I'm from the ghetto. Born and raised in the ghetto. What are you talking about? He said, that was your ghetto back in your day. Did you have AIDS babies? Did you have crack babies in your ghetto? And we think things have improved for black people in America. Did you have 50% of the female population in prison being black? 80% of the prisoners in the state of Georgia are black. 94% of the children tried as adults in the state of Georgia are black. Did you have that in your ghetto? No, I did not. And so he said he lived in a high-tech ghetto. I just say it's an incredible statement that this country, with all of its wealth, people to rally around the flag can maintain a population that's effectively in the same state it was at the end of 1865. So I would like to just go back a little bit over that history before I come forward to what is happening today and what else we might do, marking this incredible 25th anniversary of sticking together and sticking to the program, which is pretty hard sometimes. And you know, as I like to say, you know, when we talk about the history of this country, a lot of people don't want to talk about the history of this country because when we talk about slavery, people want to say, well, you know, that was just so long ago, can we just like go forward and not speak about it anymore? Can't we just like put it behind us? It's not my fault. I didn't do anything to you, and I don't know why you want reparations. I can't pay reparations. It's not my fault. Why should we pay? No, I think the government, first of all, should pay. And I could think of $40 billion right off the top that could have been put into reparations that was voted into the Bush defense budget, with the exception of my friend Barbara Lee. Everybody in the entire United States Congress voted for that $40 billion. That would have been a nice chunk of money for a down payment on some reparations. Matter of fact, I like the number 40 because it goes with the 40 acres that we never got, you know? So that 40 acres, but it's not. And a lot of people don't want to talk about reparations or talk about the slavery because it is a painful episode, but it's painful for us who have survived and are inheriting all of the ills of that history. It's just as painful for me. I didn't do it either. So the main thing to understand, though, is there was one reason why blacks were brought here, and it wasn't because nobody liked us, although there was, you know, a lot of European, you know, anti-African and inferiority, you know, theories floating around a long time. But barring all of that history, the bottom line was we were brought here to do labor. And how we came here and all of that, the whole trade, triangular trade is not necessary, but the bottom line is not for 50 years or 70 years, but for 250 years, blacks in this country, the African descendants of African captives brought to this country, performed labor for free to build up the agrarian-based economy in the United States, and that's the only reason we were here. This was a corporation from the jump, wasn't it? You know, when the boys got together and signed the Declaration of Independence, they didn't mean any women, so that kind of cut out a lot of people. They certainly didn't mean any Native people. As a matter of fact, it was just really a very small club among whom everyone felt they were, each was equal. And their biggest issue was they weren't going to pay any more money to England. After all, they had enslaved these people, killed these Indians, and mowed down this land and cultivated this tobacco that was now on the markets of Europe, and sugar and indigo and rice and all those other big-time products. They had done this work. Why should they continue to pay the English for that? So you had Thomas Jefferson writing that Declaration of Independence, saying, we're not paying you anymore. We are free and independent people, all men created equal, endowed by the Creator with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, with the possible exception of all the blacks that happen to be here. And Thomas Jefferson, of course, explains to us, despite what people think he had a mistress and that he might have been in love with Sally Hemings. Although, did you notice that the Jefferson scholars are now saying the Jefferson family is now going back, saying, yeah, we saw the DNA test, but we're still not convinced that Jefferson had any children or Sally Hemings was raped by Jefferson all those times and had his children. Even though even Aaron Burr testifies to the red-headed slave children he saw running around Monticello. But barring all of Thomas Jefferson's personal sins and crimes, the bigger one was, of course, that he did endorse slavery, at the same time talking about the freedom of all men and the equality of all men. And as he endorsed slavery, he simply said, the reason I can say that, I could be a slaveholder on one hand of blacks and talk about the equality of others, is because the black is really not like other men. The black is in fact inferior. It goes on to talk about even the color of the skin, that immovable veil of black. It's aesthetically not pleasing as white skin is. Their hair is not long and flowing. They have a disagreeable odor. They tend to be lazy, have no arc in them, and so forth and so on. And finally concludes that in the end of the day, the black is in fact inferior to the white in every single, in both body and mind. Now that wouldn't be important if Thomas Jefferson was some indentured servant from Ireland or somewhere. But Thomas Jefferson became the president not once but twice of the United States of America, and none of these little school children around here are even reading about any of that. We're still reading about George Washington chopping down the cherry tree. And if you don't believe me, ask somebody who's in elementary school what they know about George Washington, and they'll tell you that he never told a lie. Except to his slave mistress, too, because he had slave mistress, slave children, all that. And so as we moved out of this slave period, when the country was basically finished with agrarian labor and machinery and rise of industrialization, sort of the way we have the rise of technology today as a means of production and distribution, we had a rise of industrialization. Interestingly, based on the English textile industry coming up from cotton, but that's another conversation. So that's cotton produced in slave labor. But the main thing is that by the time the 13th Amendment, the abolition of slavery, or the end of the Civil War, and Lincoln allegedly freed the slaves, which of course, you know, those of us who are black and sane know that this was the most insane concept. This is like George Washington and the cherry tree. That the idea that Lincoln freed the slaves is absurd as that. Lincoln signed an Emancipation Proclamation telling you that it was a necessary war measure simply to induce the South, the Confederate States, to return to the Union, saying, in fact, that he had no interest in the outcome of slavery one way or the other. His interest was in the salvation or the maintenance of the Union. And of course, the Northern industrial capitalists won. The robber barons class was evolved from that. And in the meantime, of course, we had the black codes, and we had lynchings, and blacks were still running around looking for 40 acres, and so forth and so on. And then by 1896, we had the sort of codification of American apartheid, where we finally defined in the Plessy decision in the Supreme Court that blacks really had no rights under the law, with the possible exception of the right to vote. That is to say, we couldn't ride on the train that Plessy was trying to ride on in the state of Louisiana, as long as the accommodations were equal. And from Plessy forward, we mainly just fought to stay alive. That is to say, how do you get medical treatment, for example, since I'm talking to this group, how do you get medical treatment if you don't have any hospitals and you don't have the right under the law, under civil rights, to go and get medical care? Well, you die like Charles Drew did, like Bessie Smith did, and a number of people later on did, because of lack of access or failure, but because of Jim Crow medical care, in medical care. And so the whole Jim Crow notion developed, and we fought lynching, and we fought to get jobs against discrimination, to get housing against discrimination, to get everything else, and really didn't do very well. We tried different methods, from, you know, the Booker T. Washington saying, we'll just remain separate, and as long as we have some money that we can use to help develop our own resources, we won't ever try to force ourselves on you to integrate into your society, to vote in your society. You had Du Bois saying, we want to integrate and vote. We need that. That's the only way we're going to become free and equal in this society. You had Marcus Garvey talking about leaving. You had Philip Randolph at one point fighting for labor rights, the first labor union being the service labor union, sleeping car quarters. All these things going on against the backdrop of lynching and violence against blacks in America, all the way through to 1954, when the Supreme Court overturned one part of Plessy versus Ferguson in Brown versus Board of Education, right? And so one of the rights that blacks might have sought, it might be a human right to be informed and have education, yes? And even though we think somehow how it makes sense to pay $35,000 a year to go to a university in America, some people think that maybe education is a human right and ought to be free. A society ought to make a commitment to itself to have education for people, just like food, just like health care, and so forth. And so, of course, blacks fought for that, and then came Rosa Parks sitting on the bus like Plessy on the train back in 1896, trying to get a seat for the same amount of money. Can you believe in 1954, 55, still trying to get a seat on the bus? That was the biggest struggle we had, forgetting about the big human rights issues. And by the time Martin Luther King made his great statement summarizing the moral obligation of this country to the black, to the former slave in 1963 on the March on Washington, and by the time Johnson finally signed the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 65 as he invaded the Gulf of Tonkin in 65. And Martin Luther King signed up, the Civil Rights Acts were passed, and so the question of so-called civil rights were effectively resolved, and blacks had, after 100 years, the right to use public facilities and so forth. In 1966, when the Black Panther Party was formed, coming out of an urgency that there was something missing from this civil rights business, such as food, such as housing, such as employment, such as healthcare, education, land, and so forth. And so the Black Panther Party developed a human rights agenda. And we started talking about the right to have an education, the human right to have an education, and that a price should not be put on our heads. And we began to recognize that this was a part of a larger struggle, that it wasn't just about black people. This was also about the native people. And so we formed a coalition with and helped to form the American Indian Movement, AIM. And we knew that this wasn't just about blacks and native people. We watched the Chicanos in the fields of California for slave labor, with terrible, under the worst conditions, slave conditions, effectively, the same as blacks in the century before, cultivating the food that most of America ate and most of the world ate, making California the 5th largest economy in the world. And so we said their struggle is our struggle is their struggle. This is all integrated, so we helped to form and made a coalition with the Brown Berets. Same thing with the Puerto Ricans in New York, the Young Lords. Same thing with the Patriots, the young whites in Chicago, with Slim Coleman and so forth. And then we said, wait a minute, our struggle is bigger than that. Our struggle is for human rights. How can we talk about our rights? Look at the Vietnamese suffering under the guns and the warships of America, just the way Dr. King did. Even though some people said that was not a black issue, we said, well, we're not calling for peace in Vietnam, we're calling for victory for the Vietnamese. They have a right to have self-determination over their own lives and over their own land. We're calling for self-determination and liberation for people in Zimbabwe, and formed a coalition with ZANU in Zimbabwe, with the PAC in South Africa, and with Frelimo in Mozambique, and with others around the world. So how can we talk about the freedom of black people when half the population on the world is not free? The question of women's liberation is a part of our agenda. So how can we talk about that? And John Genet was a wonderful man who brought us a whole bunch of information. And in the whole homophobia that was prevalent among a number in the black communities, we said, how can we be free, in fact, when gays in this country are oppressed just because of their so-called sexual preferences? So we said we cannot. Gay liberation is a part of our struggle. And what about the elderly? And the Gray Panthers came up out of that. And what about the handicapped? We worked with the Center for Independent Living to talk about putting in these ramps, and that's how some of these ramps got put in. People in wheelchairs rolling up through the legislature, knocking down chairs and saying, if you don't give us some space, we're going to knock everything down until you get us a ramp. Militant handicapped people. And what about the environment, the dumping of stuff in the black community? What about the fact there's no green spaces on the earth? And people said, that's not a black issue, as though melanin was going to protect us from nuclear waste. So we said, that's not a black issue, that is an environmental issue. We said no. And we worked with an organization called the Trust for Public Land, when it was founded by Huey Johnson, to put gardens in the ghetto. So we developed programs around human rights under the title of Survival Program, Survival Pending Revolution, because we understood one thing, that none of this was going to come to pass. None of this was going to come to pass as long as you had the existing scheme, the capitalist scheme, in which greed and exploitation of human beings and the earth itself were part of the societal contract that we made with each other. We understood that, and so we said, let's organize around the issue that people can understand. We talked about the right to eat, not to pay to eat, but the right to eat. So we started free breakfast for children and free groceries, feeding 25,000 bags, passing out 25,000 bags of groceries at a time. And we talked about the right to health care and the right to have a healthy body. And we developed free clinics, as was said, sickle cell anemia testing, free ambulance service. If you live in the black community now, call 911, see who comes to see about you. You better say policeman down. Otherwise, you better find a car and get to a hospital. If you live there, you know what I'm talking about. We had pap smears that we had and mobile units that we went into people's houses and gave them a little stick. You go take it in your bedroom, assistant, and hand it on back, and we're going to tell you what's happening. How simple was that? We talked about the question of food distribution and whether or not the food was safe. We challenged stores like Safeway. Talked about lead paint. Talked about pest control in our homes. Talked about preventive care. Talked about preventive health care, not just immunization, but decent housing, decent food. These were all part of the health questions, weren't they? And you know, I want to tell you, I used to live in France, and somebody says, people say this all the time, but somebody asked me recently, yet again, well, do you know any country better than America? Well, yeah, France. And I know people say, oh, the French don't like the Americans. And there's a reason for that. I don't even like the Americans. I try to say, no, I have a U.S. passport. I'm really not, flying that flag. And we see Cuba, and I've certainly been to Cuba, and we know that they have a lower infant mortality rate than we do in the black community of America, that communist enclave, that dictatorship run by a dictator. We know that they have, of course, the highest literacy rate in the Western Hemisphere, just about. But when I was in France, for example, I know a sister that was there who had come to France and married a brother who was from Chicago. They were both from the United States, a black couple. They met in France, they got married. He had a job, she didn't. He was there on a green card, as it were, and she was there as his wife, and she got pregnant. And when she went to the hospital to have her baby, first of all, there was no charge for the prenatal care, even though she wasn't a citizen of France, none whatsoever, or if it was like $10. And she went to the hospital, she had her baby, there was no charge for that, and then she stayed in the hospital for a week, which I found to be phenomenal. What about the rest of your body? They took care of her and all of this, and then they give you in France a 1-year supply of baby food and milk and diapers. Because isn't that the moment of infant mortality, that first year that we're talking about? Well, gee, what a strange thought that a country would decide that it would give enough food for everybody to have food for your child for at least the first year, for free. But in any case, I'm just making note that there can be a commitment if we want it to be a commitment, or people want there. The Black Panther Party tried to do all these things, and of course, in the meantime, came the United States government and the counterintelligence program of the FBI called COINTELPRO. And the Black Panther Party was identified as the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States, and effectively, we were called terrorists. But the interesting thing that J. Edgar Hoover said when he issued that statement is that he wasn't scared of our guns. Nobody was scared of our guns, and as a matter of fact, anybody with half a brain would have known that the few little guns that we had, and we did have guns, and for black people it seemed like a lot, but we had everything that we could imagine on the gun side. But in comparison to, say, the LAPD, Chicago PD, put them all together, State Guard, National Guard, FBI, the CIA, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the ATF and every other entity that's armed in the United States, some that we don't know about, the shadow government and the non-shadow government, all of that. Our little guns really didn't amount to very much. And so nobody was scared of us in any meaningful way. Even though some people with bravado today like to think that the government was afraid of us. What the government was afraid of is that we were spreading these terrible ideas about people thinking that they had a right to eat. They had to have a right to a clinic and health care in their communities. And that these were rights, these were human rights. And then once people began to think about, well, wait a minute, if I have a right to breakfast, I might have a right to lunch and then dinner. Next thing you know, I'm going to be looking at all this control Safeway. Next thing you know, I might be talking about taking over all of the health care, making it all free to everybody. Some horrible socialized medicine concept, God forbid. So by the time that they were finished with the Black Panther Party and our little programs, people were scared to even come around us, and we were effectively destroyed from a variety of battles that we waged with the government trying to maintain this ideal. And then, of course, we went through that long night of Nixon and finishing up Nixon and then Bush and Reagan and Carter. And people just love Jimmy Carter. I just like to remind people that Jimmy Carter, when he ran for and won as governor of the state of Georgia, his lieutenant governor and running mate was Lester Maddox. People forget that little stuff. It's like, oh, Carter's doing great things for the nation. What did he do? I have no idea. I see that he was aligning himself in many ways with the Shah of Iran, which is how he ended up losing the election, if you recall history, only recently. And so as a result, we find ourselves in a dilemma where, you know, we've all been wandering around and doing stuff. You have been doing work here, and other people have been doing work, and a new generation of people has grown up, yet another generation like Little B, born in 1983. And nothing major has occurred. So we do have a high-tech ghetto with AIDS and crack. I have a girl named, I read about this girl in my book, and I want to just quickly mention this to you. Her name was Chantello Young, and she was a little young girl in Atlanta, in one of the big housing projects, and her baby, she was 19 years old, and she had 2 babies, and her younger baby died choking on a roach in the housing project. And the head of the Atlanta Housing Authority, a black woman named Renee Lewis Glover, said the reason that baby died choking on a roach because that girl kept a nasty and dirty house. Now, anybody who knows anything about roaches, and I know a lot about roaches, because I know when you turn on the light, you got to jump back. You know? So, you know roaches don't come from filth. You know, and if you were a roach and you heard about Georgia, you would walk to Georgia because Georgia is a perfect place for a roach to live. But if you lived in the Perry Homes where Chantello Young lived, and on the other side, on one side of Perry Homes, contiguous to it, is something called Gun Club Park, overrun with that kudzu that these people ingeniously thought they were bringing to do some new thing in Georgia, and it ended up being vines that ate half of Georgia. These vines have overrun and stand in water in the so-called pool that nobody has used in the last 15 or 20 years. And then on the other side of Perry Homes, which sits isolated at the top and on a hill in Atlanta, is the Gun Club Sanitation Landfill. Now, you know, you live here, here's a polluted creek over here, here's a park overturned over here, and you want to ask me about roaches. You know, a roach in a situation like that might have come up and killed somebody, because if any roach that could survive the landfill and the kudzu and the water and everything else, a pretty strong roach. They had snakes at Perry Homes, they had rats that could eat through concrete. You know about those rats, don't you? After they get adapted, they can eat right straight through all of those stuff you think you're putting up for a rat. Anybody knows about a rat? I'm not talking about the mice that my grandmother used to say, oh, that one's cute. I'm talking about the rat that will eat through all this cement, right? Because they become strong and they adapt quickly, just like roaches. The roach that killed Chantello Young's baby. And how many have we heard stories can we repeat like that when we talk about health care? And yet now the blacks have joined in, calling for the rope, the way the old racists used to do, saying that Chantello Young was a trifling little girl who had 2 babies out of wedlock, as though that had something to do with the death of her child. And then we have the Clinton era. And you know, Negroes still do love Clinton, even today. He was a good president. And I'm trying to figure out, why do people say this? Because remember the health care plan that Clinton got the vote on? Remember that part? Does anybody even remember Hillary? Remember Hillary and the health care plan? The universal health care plan? But instead of universal health care, Clinton gave us welfare reform. Criminalizing poor women and sending their children to hell, like Little B. If you don't work, and now the Bush additions, and everybody's now all upset about Bush wanting marriages. Did anybody notice it was Clinton that put welfare reform out? Why? Because all the feminists, the Gloria Steinem set, they didn't see it as an issue for feminists. Reproductive rights, that's the only issue for us. As though welfare reform were not a feminist issue. Instead of a health care plan, Clinton gave us a health condemnation plan in the form of 3 strikes and you're out. Putting drug addicts and poor women prostituting for drugs in prison, so that we now have the luxury of, or we now can say that we have the highest percentage and the highest number of people incarcerated in the United States than in any country in the world. And if it's interesting to you, Georgia happens to have the highest incarceration rate in the United States, for what that may be worth. There's no drug treatment, there's just put them away and kill them. And now, of course, we have the new Bush, but it's the same Bush shit. So, what we're dealing with now is war and more war and rumors of war, but no health care, no food, no clothing, and so forth. I want to close by saying that I want to congratulate you for holding the line, the Champaign County Health Care, even in the face of all that is going on in this immediate community, which is a reflection of what is happening throughout this country. Various disparities and various differences here or there with respect to the fact that there's the infant mortality rate in comparison to the rest of Illinois and so forth. But the bottom line is that you have stuck to the line and tried to hold on to some kind of an idea that people really have a right to live, and that if we don't have health care, there's a clue in here, you could die. And that the question of uninsured or insured, what kind of conversation is it? It's an absurd conversation. That you want to change this dynamic is wonderful, to help the powerless and empower everybody. This is a wonderful goal. The question is, how are we going to get where we really need to be? We know what has to happen. We can't have this country remain in the same status that it is. We can't talk about charging people for medicine and food and putting a price on people's head, not if we want to be a humane and serious society. If we believe that health care is a human right like all others, we have to know that it is a larger struggle and that it is all interrelated and join hands together on common ground on this question. So the question is, what does need to be done? And as I say, the question, where do we go from here, is a question that Martin Luther King raised only months before he died in a famous speech that he gave. He said, where do we go from here? We've got our civil rights acts. We have everything, but we black people, we're still living at the bottom of life in America. Where do we go from here? Can we just keep on marching, keep on doing the same things, or something else had to happen? And he talked about, what, a poor people's campaign, right? One of the issues was guaranteed health care for every single person, was it not? Do we remember this history? Do we remember the dream, or do we just think he was just some two-dimensional poster that we celebrate every January, who was a nonviolent man, most importantly, according to the way the propaganda goes? So Martin Luther King says, well, I think the problem is there are fundamental changes that have to take place. And he said it reminded him of a biblical story, of course, being a preacher. He said in which a juror came to Jesus and said, Jesus, I've sinned so much. Can I be saved? Jesus looked at him and said, Nicodemus, I don't think so. Looks like you might have to be born again. And so Dr. King said, as far as I'm concerned at this point, it may be that America has to be born again, has to be uprooted and changed. We're going to talk about real universal health care and real food and clothing and decent and a humane society. In closing, I just want to read you a telegram that was sent to Dr. King from Huey Newton back in 1972 that sort of summarizes what I think is what we need to be refocused on. And he talks to the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference people, brothers and sisters, the 4 years that have passed since the assassination of our beloved Dr. Martin Luther King, a great leader of our people, teacher and mentor, have served not to make us forget, but in fond memory help us resolve to push forward his struggle for the freedom of all humankind. The programs to provide black and poor people with basic survival needs are in keeping with his very ideas to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the imprisoned. We cannot calculate Dr. King's contribution with any mere measure, for his works, his ideas, remain one with and part of the struggle of all poor and oppressed people, and therefore with our victory over that oppression. And Huey closed with what I opened with and what I want to close with, all power to the people. Thank you.
Thank you all very much, not just for coming here tonight, but for staying with us, staying with this organization, keeping with the struggle and staying in the struggle that's ahead, because we have a lot of work to do. I really want to encourage y'all to read Elaine Brown's books if you haven't read them yet. I mean, you won't be able to put them down, and they're just incredible. And they're selling some still out there, or you can come and join us at Pages for All Ages tomorrow at 3 o'clock. She'll be there doing a book signing, and you can purchase copies of your books there. I want to wish you all good health and a good evening, and thank you very much. And remember that there are little cards probably in front of your place settings. If you wish to make a contribution to healthcare consumers, an additional contribution, you're welcome to do that. And Paulette, who has her hand up, she will take that from you, or you can take it home and then send it in to us. But anyway, thank you all very much and have a good evening.